There were many, many moments of discomfort with my granddad, and it was really, really painful to watch, both on, seeing his discomfort in his physical body as well as, in sort of his emotional and his mental body too. But by being present, what I did was I actually opened up to also receive gifts of joy, of love, of beautiful and profound memories that I 100% would otherwise have missed. Hey, I'm Tanya Wilkinson, and this is Death on the Daily, bringing the conversation about death out of the shadows and into the mainstream. Because along with birth and change, if there's one thing that's going to happen to us all, then death is it. And we're going to explore how death actually shows up for us on the daily in a multitude of ways, and how when we allow ourselves to accept and to be with death, how it can teach us a whole heap about how to live this life well. In today's episode of Death on the Daily, I am sharing 7 lessons that I learned from journeying with my dying granddad. And it's really poignant that I'm sharing this today because on the day that I'm recording this, it's actually 2 years and 1 day since my granddad died. And in the last year of his life, I had the honor of spending an afternoon with him and my nan each week in their care home. And this was after a good few years of avoidance. I don't think I know that I'd been hiding behind my work, specifically in Formula One, as, being too busy. I can't step away. I can't go and see them on the weekends, or I need to rest on the weekend. I'm too exhausted because work is so full on. And, yes, work was very full on, but I can also see that in that avoidance, it was because it was really difficult to witness my grandparents going through, this end stage of life, and to witness people who I had the honor and been so lucky to have known for the whole of my life, and known, when they were in their sort of younger, elder prime, and, going ice skating with my nan and seeing my granddad abseiling down. They used to have a cliff behind their house, and, all of these things. It can be really, really hard as we navigate these losses, as those who we love are, in that period of dying, and certain aspects of them are let go of. So I can see that I was avoiding. And actually, my nan came to me in a dream and she said, your granddad and I, we're nearly ready to go now. And whatever your beliefs are, I do believe that there's a spiritual connection. And I do believe that, a spirit of my nan, who in her dementia journey, it definitely feels like she's between 2 worlds and has been for a while. And I believe that she did come and she gave me that nudge, but equally could have been my subconscious saying, hey, you haven't been to see your grandparents, and giving me that boot to go and see them. And that message in my dream shocked me into literally the next day. I was booking my train ticket to go to their care home, booking in to get that slot to go and see them. And actually, prior to that, I'd only gone to see my grandparents in their care home with another family member, with my dad, with my brother, with my mum, with whoever. And I can now call myself out again on the fact that that brought me comfort, and I wasn't willing to be with the discomfort of, let me just go and sit with them for an afternoon. And that's exactly what I did on that day, with that urgency from that message from my nan. And I busted through my fears in that moment. And actually, I found, even in being with my discomfort of what I was seeing, in them, of seeing them, particularly my granddad at certain points in pain, I actually realized just how much I can hold. And in Death in the Daily, my mission and purpose is really about inspiring all of us to just see how much more we can hold, see what we can be present to as humans, because actually I believe that we really undervalue ourselves and our capacity to be with the difficult. So in being with my grandparents, and specifically my granddad in his final year, including in his final few days. So it was early in 2022 when my nan came to visit me in a dream. And then it was in November when my granddad died. And after he died, I really integrated the lessons that I learned from just being present with him and my nan. And I actually wrote them in this journal, And for anyone who is watching on the video, I can show you the exact page where it is in my journal. And I wanted to share these 7 lessons with you because I think they're really profound. And what they can teach us is not just about how we can be with those who are dying or those who are going through difficult and challenging circumstances, but actually, I think they're really life affirming for us in any day. So let's dive in with the first lesson, and that is meet others exactly where they are, always. So many of us have a reflex to try and fix things, even when we can't, or when actually it's not really our place to do so. And this includes when people are in pain, when they're sick, when they're hurting, when they're grieving, when they're devastated, when they're going through trauma, tragedy, loss, situations that actually, because we haven't been, I suppose, conditioned to sit with the uncomfortable through our culture and just, how we typically are. So what that does is we typically have that urge to, I'm going to root this in myself and what I've always got that urge to do, which is fuss around. What can I do? Can I bake you a cake? Can I do something? What can I do? Or, it might be the platitudes, and I call myself out on myself in the past of the platitudes that I've said, for example, when it comes to baby loss of, oh, you've shown that you can be pregnant, so you'll be pregnant again. Well, you can't tell me that. You don't know. There's no crystal ball here. So please don't share that perspective with me. Please just sit with me. Or the other platitudes of everything happens for a reason, or, heaven's just got another angel. And in the case with my grandparents, I could see how in the past I would just fill up the space with noise, just conversation. Let's just chat, 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 chat. And it would be with a real nervous energy as I connect back into sort of my past versions of myself. But actually, in spending more and more time with my granddad, and specifically in those moments where I could see he was in pain, he was upset, he wasn't happy, and just sitting with him in compassionate presence and silence, just holding silent space for him, I could see that actually that's exactly what he needed. He didn't need anything more. And I'm not going to tell you that it was easy for me at all moments, but what it really was it was a practice. And actually I learned so much from my granddad. And I think it was about a couple of months in to my journeys to see them that, I'd really sort of eased into this space where I was comfortable just sitting in silence with them. And with that, what I then cultivated was a personal practice before I went into their care home. So I used to stop by the stream that was just outside of their care home. It's a beautiful spot in nature, absolutely gorgeous. And I just take a moment to take a few deep breaths after a busy train journey where I was often doing some work or, reading or messaging friends or whatever it is. So I wanted to come into presence, leave anything that I was thinking about sort of on the way up behind, as well as make that commitment to myself to set an intention that I was going to show up, I was going to be fully present for my grandparents, and I was going to meet them exactly as they are today. So that's a practice that you can do if you are navigating difficult circumstances with anyone, or perhaps a practice of making that intention to be present with yourself. And I love to do it in nature. Just find that spot in nature that you really connect with. Really feel your feet on the ground. Take a look out to the horizon and just come back into yourself and make whatever commitment of presence and meeting yourself and others exactly where they are. So second up, we've got leaning into the discomfort, and that the more that you connect in to those moments of discomfort, the more joy and love that there is actually to be found. So as I mentioned, there were many moments of discomfort with my granddad, and it was really painful to watch, both on, seeing his discomfort in his physical body, as well as, in sort of his emotional and his mental body too. But by being present, what I did was I actually opened up to also receive gifts of joy, of love, of beautiful and profound memories that I 100% would otherwise have missed, including for my granddad on one really terrible day that he had. I showed up at the home, and the care home team, the wonderful team there, they shared with me, your granddad, he's in a bit of pain. He's got, something going on with his stomach. Don't worry, we are doing everything that we can, but he's going to be a bit uncomfortable. And so with trepidation, I walked down the long corridor. There was a long corridor towards his room. It was actually right at the end of the care home. And I thought in my mind, okay, remembered what my mum said to me. You can just do short visits. That's totally okay. I thought, okay, I can do a short visit, stay with him for, about 45 minutes, and then I'll go. But as I sat with him in his discomfort, what surprised me was actually the purpose that I could also feel within me of just being there with him, holding his hand, just gentle chatter with him, and then falling into silence as I observed deeply within him that that's what, I felt that he wanted. And what really surprised me was actually as I stayed, the more comfortable I got with being uncomfortable at his discomfort. And I stayed and we sat, and there were moments of comfortable silence. There were moments of uncomfortable silence. There were moments of my granddad crying out. There were moments of me having to get the care team in just to check with them and make sure that everything was okay. And we did this for hours. And actually, my heart, I could feel it expanding as I spent more time with him in this space. And as I got ready to leave, I just said, as I always do, I love you, Granddad. And he said to me, I love you, darling. He squeezed my hand, and the look in his eyes was just a look that I will remember forever. Well, I say forever. I will not last forever, but I will remember for the rest of my life. And as I walked out and, after kissing him goodbye, and I just remember him calling out as I left, I love you. And I called it back to him as far as we could hear each other down the halls. And that was just such a beautiful moment that I know I would have missed, because actually, we sat together in his discomfort, and his discomfort was the most important thing there, not my discomfort. I managed to leave that, and that gave me the lesson of how I could, push through my discomfort and leave that at the door to be fully present with my granddad. And then the beautiful gifts and those beautiful moments of joy that I also unearthed alongside his discomfort, and me being there to care for him in that moment. So my third lesson from my dying granddad is constant action is the thief of true connection. So I, as I mentioned a lot in this podcast, had a 14-year corporate career where ultimately I put my career first. And within this, there was a very fast pace of life. And I worked in Formula One. It was definitely a Formula One fast pace of life, but not just limited to that. That was through the whole of my career. And actually, a lot of it was the pace that I put upon myself that I wanted to move at. And spending hours with my grandparents, I actually found a different pace in life. It's a slower pace that in truth was quite, I suppose I wouldn't say uncomfortable for me to be with at the start, but I definitely would be a little bit impatient, on certain trips to see my grandparents, looking at my watch and thinking, okay, when's the next train kind of thing? Like, let me go. We've sat here in silence for a couple of hours now. But actually, I found such beautiful moments in those moments of just doing nothing except holding my granddad or my nan's hand, just staring out of the window with them. My granddad's room overlooked a beautiful oak tree. My nan's room was overlooking a gorgeous field. We just sit there for hours, just enjoying each other's company and not having not having that space filled with stuff. And specifically as well, I also had a practice of just putting my phone away. And my lesson here is really rooted in how much noise we fill up each day with, be it in action mode, ticking off our to-do list, rushing around, overscheduling our time, including that time with our family, looking at screens, having noise everywhere. I am definitely guilty of having a podcast or music on. We take ourselves away from these beautiful and simple moments of connection with those who we love. So as you spend precious moments with your loved ones, what is a commitment that you can make to just be with them in this moment, to stop and smell the roses, whether that's switching your phone to airplane mode, telling work you're going to be offline, not overfilling those schedules. Obviously, we're coming into the festive period. What's that time for you just to sit and chat, just to, enjoy their company, and maybe even enjoy just beautiful moments of silence, of staring out into nature or taking a beautiful walk together. So fourth up, we've got finding comfortable in those uncomfortable silences. And this is obviously very much linked to what I've been sharing before. And when I trained as a coach, I realized how terrible myself and many, many of us are at just sitting in silence. And with my grandparents, those silences were really, really golden. Moments where we could, as I've just shared, just be enjoying them, their energy, and without that pressure of upholding a conversation. But also, another thing that I gained from that was being able to, I guess, more deeply observe them, to really, again, to the first point of meeting them exactly where they were. In those moments of silence, I could really observe, okay, with my nan, she hasn't spoken for a while. So what can I observe that can give me those cues of how she's really feeling, or how I can give her some little bit of care that can be really, really nourishing for her. And in my granddad's final week as well, there were various family members in and out of his room. I stayed in his room for a couple of nights, and there was a lot of noise at a lot of points. And actually, there was one night that I stayed in his room. I slept in the little armchair next to his bed, and I was on my own. So the previous night, I had my brother there with me. And that night, it was just me and my granddad. And I very purposefully kept it really silent. In fact, in the whole of the evening, other than when the nurse came in to check on him and his medication, I was just there with him, meditating next to him, as well as then just at one point, I felt some words that I needed to share. So I shared them with him. And then for the rest of it, it was just sacred silence. And it was such a beautiful, beautiful experience. And actually the next day, I remember the nurse came in, it was about 3 or 4 a.m. to check on again, the drugs. And she commented how, oh, he's got more color in his cheeks and he looks very relaxed. And in that moment, I really, really integrated the power of that sacred silence, of me just being there, being present with him, but just sitting in that silence, which, yes, at certain points was uncomfortable, but I could sit with that discomfort. I could be with him. And actually, both he and I reaped so many, benefits from that. So fifth up, we have love your loved ones like tomorrow may never come. So this is where my daughter comes into this podcast episode. She pops up a lot. She's always in my heart. And my granddad, he lived a very, very long and fulfilling life. But, my daughter, she didn't. We lost her at 5 months into pregnancy. And she really taught me that lesson that you just never know. Tomorrow or today could be any of our final days. So why not live this life, like it's our final day, to love our loved ones like tomorrow may never come. And I guarantee that if you tell your loved ones how much you love them, you show them how much you love them, do it in your own way, you definitely won't regret it. And that's actually something that Alistair Gray and I spoke to on a recent episode. So if that sort of love and sharing your love with your loved ones is speaking to you right now, go check out that episode. And so sixth up, we have a joyful state can actually be a resilient one. And this one is not subscribing to toxic positivity. I'm not here to tell you to plaster a smile on when you are going through devastating times. But actually, in my experiences, both in, being with my granddad in his dying and in grieving him after he died, as well as doing exactly the same with my daughter, I found that actually in allowing myself to be present with dying and death and meeting my loved ones exactly where they are, that actually I can also find joys in those moments that can support me in finding that resilience. Because what I've experienced when I've been through my, grief journeys is that it isn't wall-to-wall pain. Actually, when I was navigating our daughter's loss, I likened it to the contractions that I went through in her stillbirth. And I actually mentioned this to a midwife in the hospital. I said to her when I was going through the contractions, because, she'd already died before, so I was grieving her before she was born. And I mentioned to the midwife that I could find comfort both in the contractions and in my grief, because I realized that both of them were impermanent. Much like the contractions, there's that searing, deep, raw, primal pain. And then there's the release. There's almost the ecstasy of that moment where you're just like, oh my goodness, here I am still living, I'm still alive, and I'm still feeling. And actually, yes, there's pain, but there's also the relief. There's also, those curious moments of joy that I've found in all of these journeys. So with that acknowledgement, when we're navigating these really, really challenging times, and just in general in life, because even everyday life can be difficult or can be mundane. So ask yourself, what joy, what love, and what meaning in the now can I connect into that can coexist alongside any of the pain, any suffering, as well as, any of those days where things just feel a little bit blah. And finally, we got point 7, never taking time with your loved ones for granted. So obviously, as I've shared in this episode, I must admit I did this for years, putting my career, as well as in truth, my weekend social plans or my weekend chilling plans first. So with this in mind, and with the fact that actually I've still got some work here to do, I want to flow into my note to self that I end every episode of Death on the Daily with. So this note to self is written to me in the now, bringing a little bit of compassion, but also that nudge to remember what's most important. So I wrote to myself, I spent years, or rather decades, assuming that we all live forever. But now I know that this is not the case. And in fact, none of us know what will be our final day. So this is my commitment to my intention that I will continue to take steps to create a life where I can center me and my family and put us first above all else. So this is actually rooted in an intention that I speak to myself each day about putting myself and my family first above all else. Because as I've shared, I definitely have more work to do. I've come a long way since my days in corporate, but I've still got a long way to go here. And I am always working towards those better boundaries in life and work that are cultivated in a way that really, really centers what's most important to me in this life, which is me and my family. So if you feel that you're out of balance in this space, let this be your invitation to start taking those steps now so that you can show up fully present and ready to receive all of the love in the now with those who matter the most, including in difficult times. And I want to close out this episode with just heaps and heaps of gratitude to my wonderful granddad, who I miss so much, who taught me so much, including these profound lessons. And, I potentially wouldn't have trained. In fact, I say potentially, probably wouldn't have trained, when I did as a death doula, which wouldn't have supported me in my journey with my daughter, and then obviously in my purpose where I am now. So for me also, this is where I think that there's really profound lessons that we can receive from being with our elders, including in those uncomfortable times as they are navigating their challenges in their final chapter. So Grandad, I am so grateful to you. I'm sending you up there so much love. And for anyone who's listening, I'm also sending you lots and lots of love. All of my gratitude to you for joining me for another Dead Conversation. Death on the Daily is edited by David Strutt. The music is Set Free by Katie Gray. And I am Tanya Wilkinson. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would be over the moon if you can rate, review, and subscribe. It really, really helps me to get the word out there. And if you want to say hi or to hear more about my work as a coach and death doula, including how I support my clients to navigate their death on the daily, then all of the ways that you can connect with me are in the show notes. I'll be back soon with some more dead conversations. And in the meantime, take good care of yourself and others.
There's a cold fire, there's a crossfire, and there's something inside. And we'll never make it, and we'll never break